Good evening, everyone. Check, check. Does everybody hear me okay? Great. Welcome, everybody. My name is Megan Skidmore, she, her. I am Powerhouse's Director of Development, and we're so happy to have you with us tonight for the Conversation Series. This program provides an opportunity for our local and creative communities to hear from Powerhouse Arts staff working behind the scenes and the artists they work with and alongside of. With every conversation, we offer a unique space to engage with our featured guests, whether it's watercoloring, badminton, or something else entirely. Tonight, we are brought together for Art Rackets, world-building collaboration and badminton with interdisciplinary artist Ivan Forde and Powerhouse Prints director and master printer Luther Davis. Woo! Before I share more about our featured artists for tonight's conversation, as your host, I just want to tend to some quick housekeeping items. As you may notice, with me speaking now, and you definitely will, as they start playing, the sound reverberates in a unique way in this concrete cave as we are in, so beautifully designed. But just be mindful of how sound travels both in this space and outside in the hallways. And please take this moment to make sure that your phones are silenced so we have no extra noise interrupting. After the conversation, we will have about 10 minutes for an interactive twist to a typical Q&A and a light reception to follow where you can head to the back and meet Ivan, pick up one of the unique posters of Ivan and Luther playing, and take pictures in front of Ivan's large-scale installation bioluminescence. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our featured guests in conversation tonight. Ivan Forde is a contemporary artist based here in New York City, working across photography, printmaking, collage, sound performance, and installation. Ivan performs for the camera, often outdoors or in the studio, framing himself as protagonist, antagonist, and chimerical human-animal hybrids, navigating the antique structures of epic poetry to redefine contemporary notions of migrations, memory, homelands, and identities. Ivan's nonlinear analysis of classic poetry about the origin of nature, the ocean, human culture, life and death opens the possibility of reformed archetypes, alternative endings, and new beginnings. By crafting new visual epics, often depicted in shades of blue cyanotype, Ivan intertwines the personal and the global to offer a transformative view of prevailing narratives that unite us across cultures, geographies, and time. Ivan has held performances at the Kitchen, the Jewish Museum, and the Whitney Museum. Select institutional group exhibitions include the Smithsonian National African American Museum of History and Culture, Columbia University's Wallach Gallery, Syracuse University's Palettes Gallery, MICA, MCA Chicago, the Studio Museum, and Ingrid Juice Gallery in Antwerp. Ivan was the PHA inaugural Air Fellow in the print shop last year in 2023. Let's hear it for Ivan. Woo! And during that time, he expanded upon his practice working in cyanotypes, teaching our team tricks, and creating the very first PHA publishing edition, which you can see on the back wall here, called Fall of Man. He is a recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the Whitney Independent Study Program in 2022, the 2020 Emerging Artist Award by Baxter Street Camera Club of New York, the Cittavella Ranieri Visual Arts Fellowship in 2019, and the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans 2017. Welcome, Ivan, and thank you so much for your collaboration with us. Luther Davis, hello. Luther has been the master printer and director of Powerhouse Arts print program since 2016. Prior to the print shop at Powerhouse Arts, he was a co-founder of Fourth Estate, a fine art publisher focused on producing limited editions with emerging artists. And from 1999 to 2016, he was the master printer and director of Excel Editions, a fine art print atelier specializing in screen printing that produced over 300 editions a year with more than 100 artists. In our own print shop here at Powerhouse, Luther plans to expand his services to include lithography and intaglio, the print medium that he studied and fell in love with as an MFA student at The Ohio State University. Beyond his academic training, Luther worked with master printer Jean-Yves Noblet at Noblet Serigraphy when he moved to New York in the late 90s. He relished the collaborative nature of the print shop and the sharing of ideas that he could not find elsewhere. To continue his love for sharing of ideas and knowledge, Luther also teaches printmaking at Parsons School of Design and the Cooper Union. Please join me in welcoming Ivan Forde and Luther Davis.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Absolutely, thank you all.
Ivan, you've actually played tennis, or you did play tennis?
Yeah, when I was between the ages of like 5 and 10.
All right. You're pretty serious about
it? Very early memories, but I was pretty serious. I was the captain of my team.
All right.
It was,
Well, I have to admit, until I saw this poster, I thought it was badminton. I didn't know there was an N. So
yeah, I didn't know
that's
it was a
how
minton.
new I am to this sport. It was badminton. When I learned it was, the N was silent. It was badminton. So this is going to be, do you have any stretches? You all,
yeah, actually.
you all want to stretch with us? Is it something like this? We a little stand up? Get some
Pretty important stuff.
Okay.
So, you know, really simple. Just mind your neighbors, but, you know, you can do like a quick shoulder, kind of up and down.
If it crunches, is that bad?
Some deep breaths. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. And the classic.
That actually
Rotate your, your wrists. Other side. All right.
Yeah.
And then this is like a little, the little ankle roll.
Oh, that's
Take
important.
it from up. So you want to, usually you work like from top down, but, this is badminton, not tennis. So
All right.
and then a little, neck roll. Other way. Bringing back memories of like literally being like super young in like a little circle doing these stretches all the time. And normally we would like do a lap around the court, but
Let's not do that.
let's not. But yeah,
Well, thank
that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, we thought, Ivan and I spent a lot of time talking to each other. And so this should be I think it's going to be pretty natural for us. We also are always doing something while we're talking. So we're never just sitting and looking at each other talking. So that would actually feel unnatural to us,
Yeah.
to be sitting in a chair not doing something. So
Absolutely. Also, I can't imagine you sitting in a chair.
no, I do sit upon occasion. Yeah, so we're going to try to get into a flow here. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And when you have a question, we have 6 rackets total. We encourage you to come up and play with us if you want. You don't have to. But Ivan, do you remember when we met first?
Yeah, I do. But only from my point of view, because I was like coming from Harlem to a tour of Powerhouse back in 2019.
When we were in Red Hook.
When you guys were in Red Hook, and I was like super late, so I was like, oh no.
It was a long way to go. Red Hook, not unlike Gowanus, is kind of on the fringe, especially for someone coming from all the way uptown.
Yeah, but everyone had already left the shop, and you were literally like shutting the lights off.
Yeah.
And I was like, did I miss the tour? And you were like, no, you didn't.
Well, that was, I appreciate that because you had individual questions, for what was going on there versus the group was a mass thing. They're all quiet in mass. So, then I took you on a walk to see the textile shop. So Powerhouse Art's beta version was in Red Hook, and there were multiple shops. And we were in this sort of hybrid way of working until this building was completed. And then I think the next time I saw you was at a Lorna Simpson opening.
Yeah, so we initially met then, and I saw the exposure machine, the size of it, and it unlocked just the possibility of exploring scale with cyanotype, not as like a body print, which is like typically what I've seen before, but as like, photographic negatives.
Well, maybe we should explain what cyanotype is.
The cyanotype process is, it's kept my interest for like a decade now. and it's essentially working with the sun. If you imagine the rainbow, the 7 colors of the rainbow, the chemicals in the cyanotype, they respond to the blue spectrum in the rainbow. And so the blue that you see is sort of the UV, ultraviolet rays from the sun. And it's essentially a chemical that's coated paper, left to dry in the dark, and then we expose it to either sunlight or the exposure machine, the UV exposure machine. And
hanging up here, by the way, are some of the films, transparencies. They're positive films that make a negative film makes a positive makes a negative.
Yeah, but my like sort of approach, what I like to call my trademark, is that I do it the opposite way, where I print out a positive film to create a negative image versus a negative film to create a positive, which is traditionally what you do. But the part of the process that's really interesting too is the water element, like the washout. And in the edition print, we developed a way to sort of capture that element and preserve it in the final print.
Well, that's, I mean, the part of the beauty of the process is this development where it's all flowy, watery, wet.
Yeah.
And so in the Fall of Man, we printed, it's silkscreen and cyanotype and dyed paper.
Yeah,
where we're trying to capture that moment.
Yeah.
When all of the chaos was happening.
Oh, double, hey.
Yeah, so I think there were times when we leave the shop, we'd walk to Barclays and talk about it. And there's sometimes we're just like, I can't believe the things we saw today, right?
Yeah.
So part of your process is kind of alchemy and magic.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and watching.
Our walks to Barclays after, a day working were just super illuminating, because I just learned so much from you about like the neighborhood and just the way you'd see things in the street. You can go ahead.
Yeah, you do it.
And it was just spending time, and initially, we weren't friends. You invited me to work, and trusted each other to sort of partake in this kind of collaboration. And I think on those walks we really sort of took walked into through a portal together.
Yeah, that was kind of pretty interesting, Ivan, because this artist in residency program, when we met, we're like, yeah, we should do this. And I'm like, we don't have an artist in residency program. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but you've gone to so many. You've done some. So you actually informed a little bit of, or a lot of, how this would work.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for me, it's like when I do residencies, it's in part 2 ways, right? To develop the work, but then also to do up until a certain point, secret research, because I want to start my own residency one day.
Oh yeah, can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a thought of mine to sort of start a residency in a national program in Guyana, where I'm from and where my family's from, and have an exchange where you'd have artists from the diaspora, from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Europe, even Asia, go to Guyana and then have a Guyanese artist go to where they're coming from, and it's a kind of idea of institutional and exchange between residencies and between countries. So every residency I go to, I kind of take note of what works, what doesn't, and just figuring out how to build that world, eventually.
What was interesting about if you aren't aware, all the work that we're going to talk about that we made and all the stuff that's made here is made right up here. This is our print shop right above us.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing about working in that space is it's an active print shop. So there's countless projects that we're working on, and you're surrounded by other people's work and the cacophony of noises, right?
Yeah.
And people coming in, what are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, that's literally always my question. What are you guys working on? What's going on?
But also, we have I think what's interesting about working in the shop is the fact that, we have huge, not only huge exposure, but huge film. There's a bunch of, we have a tool for that, Ivan.
Yeah.
Right? We have a tool for that part of the process. So Ivan is actually coating the paper. This is paper that he's making himself. So he's coating it in our sinks that are usually for cleaning screens. And we're taping them on, not to give away too much of the process, we're taping on them our giant screens for them to dry, as if they were screens. And some really funny things happen as a result of just the extra noise that's in the space. For example, on the Fall of Man series, there's a polka dot border that was inspired because we dried Ivan's paper on top of a Julia Wachtel screen that had her image in it.
Yeah.
And somehow all those polka dots,
they transferred onto the paper. And there was just so many slippages and we were just findings of how porous the cyanotype is. I think one of the things that I think reinforced some of my I don't know, for lack of a better word, suspicions or hypothesis about cyanotype is you can get it down to not only the minute in terms of a perfect exposure, right, but down even to the millisecond, and with discovering, realizing that, realizing that, if you lay it on top of a certain kind of image, having a certain amount of light coming through, it'll just transfer over, and then you can use that transfer towards something else. I think a cyanotype in terms of not photography, but in terms of etching, in states.
Does anyone have any question about cyanotype process? So we make it so it's a photographic process. These are the films.
Yeah.
And then you're the subject in all of your works. I mean, you're the main lead, and as Megan said, the hero and the villain.
Yeah. That move really came out of the need to, well, initially in the transformation series that The Fall of Man is a part of, the need to really think of myself within literary spaces, within these spaces of epic poetry that I was studying at the time, and using myself as, these characters. But then I found that the more that I multiplied myself, the more that, the more Ivans there are in the image, the less it becomes about me as an individual.
Yeah.
It transforms into something else. It's like a society or like a weird civilization or something.
So you don't
like
see
that.
it as self-portraits.
Yeah, the thing about the process and the transformation from positive to negative, there's just this distance that happens. That
You think that
really
distance is going to continue with time when you have years and years of self-portraits that aren't portraits, and you're drawing from your own youthful self, and this is, I remember, this is Brooklyn, 2024.
I mean, it's sometimes it already happens. In some of the images, it would be a photo or a performance that, and I think of them as performances, in the studio. It'll be a performance from, let's say, last week against, performance that I did in 2017. Mm-hmm. And, my hair is different. I had dreads at one point, and I have an afro. And so for me, it's I see these different points in time. But then, there's also this distance thing where it's now these are two characters, and when they're placed side by side, there's a whole situation that happens. There's a whole narrative, that.
Do you have names for yourselves, as characters?
I don't. I haven't thought about that, but that would be that would be a pretty interesting, take. I think some of the artists that I'm really inspired by are Miyazaki or George Lucas, or these sort of artists that really can bring you into an entire world.
I met Nancy Spiro and went to her studio, and she had drawers full of characters of stamps, and they had names, they had personalities.
Yeah.
They were leitmotifs that she would bring into her work. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope to get that organized one day. but the thing is, it's I already have a collection of transparencies in the studio of images and performances spanning maybe over 5, close to 7 years now, and it's interesting to just like go into that archive and then bring them out and play with newer ones, or like try to like, build off of something that I did a couple months ago, a couple years ago.
I think it's also interesting you talk about light. In our shop, we can dial in with this. The exposure we use for our screens, you can punch in down to the 10th of a second. So suddenly the intensity of the sun, the intensity of the day, the weather was no longer a factor for you.
Yeah, I mean, for so long, especially like when I did that residency in Italy, I was making cyanotypes like outside purely with just light, and it'd be cloudy one day, and I'd be like, oh, I can't like make cyanotypes on a cloudy day, but then I did, and I was like, oh, actually, it doesn't matter. It's just like a longer exposure. So it really like opened me up to not only like a sensitivity to the sky and the atmosphere, and to color and these possibilities, but also to just like where I'm at, what I'm doing, just the immediate environment, because I'm picking like plants and flowers from where I'm at, and rocks and nails, and just making from the immediate environment in a way that's like, productive and indexical. Like,
can you talk a little bit about your sky suits?
Yeah, so, the being like frustrated with like working with natural light, but then learning from it, led me to sort of think about cyanotype in an expanded way, not just in terms of like trying to get a perfect print within a time frame, but thinking about it like, oh, like what if I did like an 8-day exposure rather than an 8-minute exposure, right? In my last artist talk, I did a washout of an 8-day exposure at Artist Space, and
so 8 days using the gallery light.
yeah, the gallery has like a camera and all the light like bleeding in. And from that, it led me to think about, well, if I can do that, then what would it mean to do an exposure in New York, in Tokyo, in London at the same time? Would the blue be the same, or would it be different? And
So getting the sky.
yeah, so, kind of like revealing this aspect of the sky that we all have access to, right? Like, everybody knows what the sky is, you know what I mean?
But it's different everywhere, we assume.
But it's different everywhere, and it's bringing like this sort of sensitivity to that. And so the sky suit came out of like wanting to kind of like ask those questions, and then
Just to clarify, there is leaning on the doorway over there. You can't see it now. If you can't, there's a suit made out of paper.
Yeah.
Like a full-on suit.
Yeah,
right?
and one of the first, projects that, or one of the first questions you asked me was like, what's your biggest like idea? And I was like, sky suits. I was like, can we make a tailored suit out of paper? And Nelly was like, yes, we can. And so we worked on it. And
Nelly's another of the master printers here, and
Yeah.
a costumer by training.
yeah, Nelly is a jack of all trades, like literally one of the smartest and most dexterous people I've ever met. And she made this suit possible, and typically when you make a tailored suit, it's being made inside out. And then she had to like crumple the paper back, to the...
Inside, turn it right side out.
Yeah, right side out. And so this paper is going through this process of not only being sewn and crumpled and, folded for the lapels, but then also like, I'm wearing it and I'm performing in it, and there's a video aspect to it, and I'm composing music for the video, and, it's just this multi sort of faceted project, but, this paper is being put through this really intense process, but then it becomes more, but you think of it as like fragile, like it would tear or something like that, but then it becomes more resilient through this like ongoing, me rolling around and dancing with, dancers in Tokyo, me walking through like Savile Row in London, or like,
Out in the backyard.
out in the backyard in a garden back here,
Well, part of the cyanotype process is this, it starts off, what, yellow? The
Yeah,
paper
it starts off
yellow?
like a highlighter green, sort of like on the net
chartreuse?
here. Yeah.
And then it becomes greener?
becomes darker, like blue. And then when you wash it out, you get the true blue of like the light sources. And so it was like such a treat to see to do this first sky suit here in New York, and we walked to like the IFPDA fair.
I got to walk with Ivan and watch this suit fade from yellow to greens. We walked out the door around the corner up 3rd Street, and we're right in front of a construction green, New York green fence, and his suit matched the green perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And then we're in the subway,
Yeah.
and then it was blue,
Yeah,
right?
people
And then,
were like, "What's this guy wearing?"
I know, like, but there's no better place to wear a paper suit than a print fair,
Yeah.
which was pretty fun. So he was like, everyone had to talk to you about it, right? It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty like wild, and then the New York, like seeing the New York suit being exposed on like a sunny, like it was like in August or early September, and then the Tokyo suit was exposed in like early November in the fall there, and try to keep the exposure within like a certain time frame.
And you were developing them with the whatever local water. So water was included too.
Yeah, the local water.
So you
water
rinse
source.
the cyanotypes, and they become this wet, soggy, beautiful, glassy thing.
Yeah.
So
And we used some water from the Gowanus Canal for the New York one.
yeah, hesitantly. It was very we're like, I don't know about this.
I like threw a bucket in and pulled out some water and then like put my hand in. I was like, I hope, but it was pretty wild. And then in Tokyo, we got water from the Sumida River, and Sumida is like the river, especially where we were, was where Hokusai like was based and worked. So there's all these plaques and stuff. So that felt pretty cool to be just like walking around the neighborhood that this really great artist and printmaker once walked around too. So.
Well, I think that's one of the really amazing things about our time working together is that it coincided with a lot of shows for you. The first piece that we worked on was for the Uptown Triennial.
Yeah.
And that's this big film over here is for that.
Yeah. That's like one panel of two, and that piece is called Nightingale. And the nightingale is like the symbolic bird of poetry and bird of like bardic song. So the premise for the Uptown Triennial was all around music and sound, and I wanted to approach it in that way, paying homage to like the medium that started it all for me. And in a way, I like kind of became the nightingale, like leaping over borders and coming out of my local kind of space, from Harlem to Tokyo and then London. I never had shows, international shows like that, where I was able to actually go. And Tokyo was a solo show, so that was like pretty momentous for me and scary at the time. But working with you guys, I felt held in that, and I felt like ready to take on that challenge. And when we met, I was making smaller paintings for Tokyo because a gallery is small and small works are kind of part of the scene there. Like large scale works like that you won't really see in a gallery. But from those smaller paintings, like I remember you came in the studio and you were like, these are, and I hadn't shown them to anyone up until that point. And you were like, these are interesting, and and then you invited me, and then we just sort of started from there. And
yeah.
started.
You also made
exploring scale.
wallpaper for that for the Tokyo show.
Yeah.
You're testing out our big printers. That was a lot of fun because we were using the scanner as a camera, right, and making compositions on the scanner of actual objects rather than also just putting them on the film.
And you brought in seaweed from your fish tank.
I cleaned out my fish tank and brought all these remnants, and the wallpaper's all playing around with that seaweed.
Yeah, because I was making, my series was like all around.
It's algae,
like,
really.
This like fish sort of narrative, and that transparency there is one of the scenes from the series where this like nude figure is like walking through this portal, returning home after spending time with these sages. And you know, Luther is like, "Do you not understand my obsession with fish? I'm not even allowed to talk about it."
Yeah. I'm not allowed to talk about it
So
at
it was
home,
just
yeah.
like, it was just like this, you know, just like happenstance, like alignment. And
Well, in cyanotype, it's very common to shoot flowers and leaves and
Yeah.
things from nature in your surroundings.
Yeah.
And not maybe so wet things.
Yeah,
Right? So I
yeah.
bought you like a goodie bag, Ziploc bags full of things from my aquarium.
yeah, you know, it took a while to figure it out, but then, you know, it just clicked into this like really beautiful and like super elegant seaweed design, and I titled it Oshun's Lair. You know, Oshun is like the West African Orisha of the ocean, but you know, this band Drexcia, based out of Detroit, like Detroit house music in the '90s. One of their early albums is called Neptune's Lair, and I just wanted to like play on that, give them homage, but then also sort of turn it into, you know, my own thing. But I think that wallpaper was like one of the like early, you know, kind of like, you know, feats of like our collaboration. You know, you knew that I would like that would like, you know, kind of just like totally freak me out. So.
Also, like, if it's not clear to the audience, part of this, like, of us doing this is trying to set each other up, right? And not be in battle, really. But this, I just found this out because I didn't know how to say badminton, and then I found that badminton was originally called battledore. Like that was one of the original names, which is a really interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
Battledore. But you have a lot of battles in your work.
Yeah, I think like battle scenes and fight scenes are like this motif that I like keep coming back to, and it's almost like, you know, when I'm a little like lost or open in the studio, I'm like, let me do a battle scene, you know, and it relates to a couple things. I think it relates to like growing up as a kid, watching my older brothers play like video games in the '90s, like all these kids coming over to our house and like, you know, just like gathering, and I wasn't allowed to play.
Because you were the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 5, and like, you know, just watching and just the fun from that. But then also the idea of like conflict when it's like, you know, mirrored, right? When you're like, you know, battling yourself or playing against yourself, you know, you can just like run with that into so many different ways.
I'm going to be here on top of this building shooting an arrow into myself down here, and I'm going to be blocking it with a shield.
Yeah, you know, and it also relates to this concept that I feel like with the dreams too. It's like, you know, when I have a dream that's like, you know, like if I have a dream about you, Luther, and I'm like, and you do something, and I'm like mad at you, and I wake up like, man, fucking Luther, shit. You know, it's not you, it's really me. So it's like the dream really reflects like all these different states like of your consciousness, right? So you're not really like battling against, you know, Luther in the dream. You're battling against.
If you were to battle me in your dreams, my son and I found this, we called it the invisibility shield. And I saw it, I thought, what a crazy cyanotype this would be, but first off, one side, I'm sort of invisible.
What? Crazy.
And the other side, I'm like a rainbow version of myself. All right, so let's see how you do against the invisible Luther.
This is like
I'm at the handicap here.
This is like every day when I come in, he like pulls out something. He's like, "Hey, check this out," and I'm like, "What?"
This is a crazy thing, though. Yeah, it's not actually helping me. I can't see anything. Isn't that weird? It's like a. So my son was playing. He had in Prospect Park. They have this. It's part mythology, part like fighting with foam swords, and they do it all summer long. So we found this on the street. This is actually the lens for a flat screen TV. So this is like focusing the picture, right? And so we just found it on the street, and I'm like, oh my God. And then we picked it up, and he went invisible. And he's like, it's gonna be my new shield. I'm like, I gotta show this to Ivan. So we were messing around with this, right? Oh, you're invisible. And we ran into this mirror that was leaning up against a light post and broke it in a million pieces. And this lady, straight out of like Sesame Street, was like, why'd you do that? And we were like, we were just goofing around. And what was interesting as a collaborator, to now I'm collaborating with a random person on the street, I'm like, I have the skills to clean this up, ma'am. Like, I can package, I can tape it, I just need some tools. And she's like, oh, God. It's just, you're gonna cut yourself, get out of here. Yeah, so that made me think of you when I saw that because of, hey, what can that do to the light?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Part of the collaboration process really has, for this last year, is to see your process in the studio. When we collaborate with artists, they're in a day, a week, not day after day. So it's really been a joy to watch your work develop over this time. And like, you can see the progression from piece to piece to piece. Yeah. And that most people don't get, well, we have a lot of artists in the audience. They're like, that is true for everyone. Yeah. But not in a production shop like that.
Yeah, it was really interesting, like, coming into a high production shop where you guys are working on, like, Mark Bradford's and, like, Amy Sherrill's and, getting to see that and getting to see an image kind of develop. I'd been in print shops before, but not on that side, just more in the community shop side, which is also equally amazing, but it was just like, okay, like, that Amy Sherrill is cool. I'm just gonna work on my little thing, like, try to but then also the vulnerability of like, I'm working on this piece. I don't really, shoot myself nude like that. So I'm like bringing this thing in to the shop, and then there's tours, and, and I'm like, fuck it, it's okay, But then also, being in the middle of a piece and, someone being very well-intentioned, being like, oh man, that's amazing. And in my head, I'm like, this is shit. This is like not. This is,
It's also you express frustration where people are like, I want to do this. I'm going to do this while you're making a mark, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're so inspired. They're so into the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're like, this is mine. Right?
Yeah.
You're just witnessing me here.
Like, I'm
could you
figuring it
please
out.
not like say you're going to take it from me in front of me like this, right?
Yeah, there's been like a lot of like, those moments, and Sonia like would hear like all about it, but in the end, what I think the takeaway was like, for me, it was like, no one's like intentionally like trying to do any kind of harm or disrupt the process, right? There's just like excitement and they're just well-wishing, right? But at the same time, when an artist is a sensitive, sensitive person as an artist, so it's like, what you say to me, especially if I'm in the middle of something, right, I'm gonna like soak that in so hard, and it might fuck me up for a couple of days. I don't know.
I appreciate that you would let me know, though. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Also people get inspired seeing someone else create. I live with 3 roommates, and they all play a different instrument.
Yeah.
These are actually my kids and my partner. But when they're each in their own space playing their own song, they're roommates. They're like not jamming. And I sent them a week and a half ago. I'm like, hey guys, here's a song I think you all could play really well together. And none of them listened to it. They didn't want any input. I'm like, I would love to hear you guys play this song. They're like, no, we don't need you to tell us what to do.
It's like, we're good. Oh man. But
they're good roommates. So.
It's like, but it's like also, I think, what you guys have in the shop is like, obviously you're, colleagues, but it also feels like family, like you guys know each other so well. And it was like so cool to come in and witness that, being at a distance at first, but then, getting closer and closer and, over the weeks and, but back to the vulnerability thing too, it's like, I think what it did for me is like increase my like own like confidence, if you know what I mean, like just like in the sense of like setting boundaries for myself and being like, okay, like if I'm in this part of the process, then I have headphones on, and then it's just like, that's a clear sign of like, yeah, like let's not, but if I'm in this part of the process where it'd be helpful to like just step away and have a conversation and have a different perspective, then yeah, so, it ultimately like just led to just a better sense of like setting boundaries in creativity and just in life in general,
Yeah. We joked around because around like this aquarium, don't tap on the glass sign. Like artists at work, don't tap on the glass. Or putting on like a construction hazard gear to know that this is a worker.
Yeah, or like an apron, or just you know, it's just something that's like, you know, I'm not really in the space to, you know, be be open. You know.
Right. But also you are open, so it's like. It's very interesting, because we do have a lot of tours come through at times, right? And so people want to engage with Ivan right away, because they see him actually making a mark. Versus the print that we're doing is sort of like, there's 25 steps, you're not going to be able to see them all, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, but you know, it's ultimately been great, you know. I think a little friction and a little like challenge and a little difficulty is ultimately like good. You know what I mean? If it was all good and easy and smooth, like, you know, then it would just be different, you know. But, you know, I think that was the challenge of, like, you know, opening up the practice, working in a space where, you know, anybody is stepping in and over my shoulder at any moment. I don't think it's not for the faint of heart, really. You know what I mean? But
well, I thought it was also interesting because some of our the print shop team is 7 people. Full-time. So some of them took a few weeks to warm up and like give you like some thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Other people were right, or maybe some people never did, but.
No, I mean, I remember like in literally like the first week coming in, I brought you this book, and then surprisingly you had a book for me, and then also Chris had a book for me, and we were all like, the 3 of us just like, wait, what? So it's like from even that moment, I was like, oh, like there's like a conversation here that's already sort of embedded, and we can already see like some possibilities for things, you know. And it's,
the Fall of Man wouldn't have happened without John and Chris stepping in at a key
and Zaire, you know.
And Zaire too. So they all stepped in, like, what if?
Yeah.
Because we were stuck, and then they each added something that took it to that next level.
Yeah. You know, I think that's one of the other things too, is like the printers in the shop, not necessarily like always like having a hands-on. You know, their hands in what I'm doing, but they would keep me sharp, you know. They would be like, why are you using that thing to do that? Like, use the better thing.
Yeah, we have over here, by the way, you've got 3
you know,
gallons
like,
of thing.
Yeah, you're right. You know, it's just like, don't tape that, like magnet that, you know. It's like, so it just came into like an appreciation, not only for like, you know, craft and people that make things, but also just like making things well, you know, because when you make something well and you take your time and it's done, and then it's done forever, you know, then the world has to deal with it, you know, and it's like, it's like, you know, just like, it's that level of like just slowing down.
Well, I'm excited for Powerhouse as it grows too, because, you know, that cross-pollination across all of the entire building. So from ceramics to metal to wood
Want
to
to switch
print. sides? Did you see the 15-minute warning?
I did not see the 15-minute warning.
Does anyone have any questions? You want to save it? Anyone feel like joining us with some questions? You don't have to. You can ask a question and not play. We have 15 minutes until question time then. Just think of your questions.
Think of your questions.
Collaboration, please. I don't know if I can do this. Switch sides like this.
You know, wait, what were we talking about?
I have no idea. No, we were talking about, I don't know anymore. I lost track. All right, yay. Whoa. You want to join us? Okay.
Yeah.
Was that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hate mics. Did you have an intentional conversation about setting boundaries of like, yes, the work vest or the earphones, or mean I'm not available to have a conversation right now? Or did that sort of, in the progression of it, be like, oh, maybe we should have a conversation? Or like, did you start the residency already knowing that these were boundaries you had to set?
Yeah, no, it was the latter. Like, I didn't, when we started, like, this wasn't, it wasn't something that I'd like anticipated, but I always felt, you know, held and respected by Luther to just come to him and be like, hey, like, this happened, you know, what do I do with that? You know, and honestly, like, Luther would hold my boundaries like every single time. Like, you know, anytime that I said something that made me uncomfortable or an interaction with someone, he would hold that boundary, and we'd like just move forward. So it was always like productive. We always felt like we closed that circle. It was never like stagnant. Like, oh man, this keeps happening. And things would happen, or even if it like happened a couple times, but then it'd be like we'd know how to sort of address that in like in a way that's not that's productive. That would just bring us forward. When you say like
Yeah. So in 25 years of working and running a shop, I've never given anyone keys to the shop too. So there's a level of trust, right? I haven't had keys to the shop. He's like, I'm gonna go. He would tell me when he's coming in, but there's a certain amount of like I think healthy respect for what he could get in a time, done in a time, and when it needed to be alone time, and when you could work here.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing is that I think every single person in that environment reacts differently. Right? It's in any studio environment.
Yeah.
So I think it's nice to have like the bullet points of like these are some problematic things with working around hundreds of people, right?
Yeah.
And it is not to put too fine a point on it, but they're seeing it. They're seeing the work in its rawest state. They're seeing all the mistakes, right? Oh, I was waiting for that. We made a pact that trick shot had to be followed by trick shot.
But yeah, I mean, but you would all, with tours and things, you would say, hey, this is, things are being figured out. Please don't take photos or share on Instagram, or if I could be like, no, you can take photos. So we figured out ways to sort of, kind of be open enough to a public that is, excited and interested and intrigued, but then also maintaining a level of like, I am at work. I'm not just chilling. I'm not hanging out. I'm having fun.
Well,
but this is also...
This audience aside, but I don't think a lot of people know how art is made. I mean, that's part of the Powerhouse thing too. It's like we want to pull back the curtain on fabrication and the service. So I think, there's this romantic notion that art has this eureka moment, right? And that all production is just waiting for that to happen.
Yeah.
And, it's like...
Or that, artists, or that artists, make work late at night, and it's uninhibited and, and sure, some people do, right? It's like you get it how you can, but I'm a morning, daytime person, After 6 or 7, I'm like, there's nothing good that's gonna come out of me, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, all constantly like learning and figuring out the kind of artist that you are and the kind of artist that you want to be,
Right.
and setting those boundaries in order to like get closer to that and to feel it, and to build this sensitivity to not only the practice, but to nature and to people and to plants and to the air and the sky, and I think going to Japan kind of reinforced and is making me think a lot about the word like being sensitive or sensitivity, and like kind of like reclaiming that in a way, or not reclaiming it, but sort of like turning the meaning on it and thinking about like it has these negative connotations of like, oh, you're being too sensitive, Like Luther, you could have easily been like, hey, Ivan, you're being a little bit too sensitive with the people.
No.
But you never were.
We have 5 more minutes? I want to say what's interesting about sensitivity is you, first off, don't leave me hanging here. I think what's interesting is your first photo gig on the Circle Line, right? You were telling me like this is pre everyone having a camera, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
This was the worst job I've ever had. Because I was like taking photos of people without them knowing on the Circle Line. I had to like be sneaky and then show them the photo and try to sell them the photo, and then print it really quickly before they left. And this was like in 2009, 2010 or something like that.
So people were just starting to have the technology to take their own selfies, right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't a part of the vernacular. But then you're basically selling, like, you're trying to capture that idyllic moment and then sell them you as a photographer and them as a subject. It's like such an interesting, whoa, it went somewhere.
Good air.
It's such an interesting dilemma. So how often were you able to, like, what's your success rate in that scenario?
Literally zero.
That is the
Could
worst.
not do it. I almost got
find
one,
that's-
but then they were like, hey, like, we gotta go. Because people had like their own cameras, you know? It's like, they were like, and also they were like, who are you taking a photo of me and my family when we're not looking? Like, I was just set up to fail. It wasn't, it was
That
never.
is crazy. But it was someone's idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What happened to those photos though?
Probably still have them on a card.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
But you know, but then also there's this idea of failure too, right? That I think artists face, and you know, people face in general. It's like, you know, what do you do with failure? You know, when I was saying earlier, like, I was captain of my tennis team, but I became captain not through like winning the exhibition match that we all were competing for the position of captain, but I got in the final with a teammate. We were playing each other. And he watched me. He like beat me like very, very easily. I like skid my knee. It was like a terrible, you know, ending. But then later on, our coach was like, you know, decided who the captain's gonna be, and Ivan, you're the captain. And you know, I'm like, you know, 8 or 9, and we're all like, what? Like, come on, like I lost. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Wasn't the point was to win and be the captain? He was like, no, but you gave it your all, you tried, you know, and that was like one of the earliest lessons I think that I can remember, where it's like, oh, like, you know, it's not, winning isn't always, you don't always have to win to win, you know.
How was your relationship with the person you thought was going to be captain after that?
I mean, I haven't seen or heard from him.
I'm not expecting it, but immediately after?
Oh,
You know, that's-
no, he was tight. He was like super
really?
upset at me. He was like, fuck this. And he was, you know, he had all reason to be, but he was the best player on the team. But you didn't have to be the best player on the team to be the captain, you know. And I would like, you know.
Well, that's the interesting thing about sports and art, like the subjective quality of it versus like, I was a swimmer, so it was like specifically about a time.
Yeah.
Right? There was no like just judge's decision. There was no on the line, off the line kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
No, but yeah, just like the competitive side to art, and you know, there is a competitive side that, you know, I found in like grad school, but I'm not gonna talk about that much. It's more so, you know, who do you want to compete with? You know, like you got to choose your opponent, and that could be yourself, or it could be like Kerry James Marshall or somebody. You know, it's like whatever the wall can be for you to like hit at your best. Find that, you know, and lean into that.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
it can change.
Yeah, and what would it take to change that? I mean, I think you have to have, there has to be a certain level of drive. I mean, there's a certain level of drive, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's you know, I have students who are, their opponent is history. They want to make a unique mark in the annals of all marks that have been made out through history. I'm like, that's unfair. Like, like, I don't see that happening today or tomorrow, but if you just keep at it, you'll find something that's yours that you can share with other people. And I think that was part of the beauty of what was happening in the collaborative space.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know.
What are we doing in time? Any questions here? Yes. Uh-oh, did we not hit a title? Yeah.
Well, so part of the title of today's talk is world building, and I'm curious, I guess for both of you, what world building means, I guess, as opposed to representing something as an artist, putting forth an entire world for people.
A good question.
It's a great
Because I have you as a world builder through your the worlds that you build on canvas, but that's
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I think, you know, it connects to the sense of like, you know, starting a residency, right? Or what Powerhouse is doing is building a world, right? The world is like people can step into it and navigate and then build their own thing, you know, start their own worlds. It's like setting people up to win, you know what I mean? Or to just like find what they what truly like aligns with themselves, you know. But then it's also world building in the sense of like, like a George Lucas, where it's like, I'm gonna start from what I know, which is like my own family dynamic, or like a Matt Groening or somebody like that, right? Like Homer is really his dad and Marge is his mom, and those are like the actual names of his family members. And so it's like you start from the world that you already know, and then you sort of like let it like blossom from there, because we're all like, we all started from some kind of seed, right? We're all like embedded in the ground, and it's people grow at different rates,
I think what's interesting from my role as a collaborator with you and some of the other artists' work is that the world changes every single artist that comes in, and I have the greatest job in the world because I don't have to live in any one world, which is my own creative energies. I get to be in Ivan's world or whoever's in the shop.
Yeah.
And so world building from my sense is like, how does one enter someone's artistic practice? How do you enter their world? And how do you be a part of it? How do you add to it? Or how do you just stay in the shadows, right? Because sometimes artists are not wanting you to enter their actual world, but they want you to be, I don't know. Oh, try.
These artists do want you to enter their world, so
Anyone
I feel like you don't believe us, but if you are brave enough,
can
we
join.
encourage
It's
you
just that
to
easy.
participate. Their thought process is improving
Don't you
with
wanna join
playing.
us?
So, anybody?
Okay. I think we have a lot of people, although it is very, when we had a warm-up round, this is supposed to meant to be encouraging. And I was like, Ivan, I'm gonna hit it as hard as I can. And I, boop, and it just went, bang. But you're so busy laughing that you missed it.
That's
right?
what I've been trying to do, not do this whole time. But it's with practice too. It's like, and the practice like leads to is a part of building the world. It's like you're practicing not towards perfection, but you're practicing towards being ready, for what like comes in that moment. And I think like that's taking like, thinking about like using cyanotype as this like medium for art, but also a medium for like just learning and knowing that, hey, like traditionally it was about like making the perfect blueprint, but then it's like, okay, that can be the last step, or it could be the first step.
As far as world building, in interesting, blueprints were originally cyanotypes?
Yeah.
The blueprints building, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know no blueprints anymore. Now it's going to be printed so much easier, but I can't even imagine that process.
Yeah.
They made some kind of film so that they could rapidly make, without much variation and without much effort,
Yeah, be able
copies.
to send the plans to Chicago and Milan, and
they could be big. And they could be big. Yeah.
And so traditionally the cyanotype is it's a starting point. It's like a mat. It's like literally a blueprint to what you want to build. And so some of my images I see as like, sure, a painting and in itself, but then it's also like, oh, this is the starting point to like a film. This is the starting point to
interesting.
to a music score or a series of poems, that I can write like ekphrastically from. So it's the work like can feed the work, and be in conversation with other things. When it starts to kind of percolate like that, and it's like you step out the way. And you just like,
Any other questions? That was a good question.
Yeah, thanks for that question.
I wasn't prepared for that.
Hi, I'm just wondering, in terms of world building, do you, like, when you're building your own world, does it need to be reconciled with, like, the current world outside in some way, like, to convince what you're doing is worth it while there's, like, a lot of trauma and, like, crisis going on? And if so, like, how do you do it or go about
That's a
it?
great question.
No, yeah, absolutely. No, it's again, I think it's like I know that, we're all aware of what's going on, and being in artistic practice, you're sensitive to what is happening, and it's like it's really a sense of like, facing the terror and the chaos, being a part of the world, but also, being aligned with, like your real experience, like what's like literally right under your nose, And so I don't have any, I'm still figuring that out in terms of like how to manage that. But it's.
Can you escape through your work? Like I go home and I turn on murder mysteries to decompress.
Yeah.
That's the
I
weirdest
escape
thing,
through like
right?
watching The Simpsons. Like my work isn't necessarily a means of escape. It's more of like a means of like filtering, like sort of taking in experiences, taking in the things I'm seeing, the things I'm feeling, and trying to like reverse engineer those feelings.
You catch yourself like later on, like, wow, I can't believe I was thinking about this then, like years later. Do you?
Yeah, you know, like it's well, it's not necessarily I can't believe that I was thinking that. It's like I can't believe that like the what happened like after I was thinking that, like, and where I am, you know. It's like sort of kind of like seeing 2 points on,
Interesting.
like in a constellation or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a constant back and forth with, you know, how you process things and the time it takes to process something.
Also because there's figures in your work. Do people like, I see this story as such. Like
Yeah.
you're laying out a title that's setting up a dynamic, setting up a framework to look at the piece, but people are bringing themselves into the work.
Yeah.
So they're bringing their own worlds into your world.
Yeah, or their own perspectives into it. And, you know, I've been saying this the past few months of like, you know, after the shows and not having any like public show or performance or anything like on my calendar and being like, you know, it's a time to where I'm like, I'm making, but I'm not necessarily making sense. It was like really the first time like in, you know, this part of my like art practice that like I had the privilege to do that, where it was like nobody's over my shoulder, nobody knows who I am, nobody really cares what I do. So what will make me wake up in the morning and do this? Like what's pushing me, you know? And it's like being dialed into that. And the need to, you know, as dark as the times are, the need to, you know, just bring some beauty or a moment of like, you know, just a space for people to like tap into those sensitive parts of themselves and to be able to reflect and. But
At the Uptown Triannual, it was very interesting watching everyone interact with your work. Because being an outsider who helped make it, but it wasn't my narrative, and then, so I'm stuck in the process, like, oh, and we did this and this, but then I love listening to everyone's stories as they're digesting your work. Any other questions?
We have time for one more.
You mentioned that you are an interdisciplinary artist, and so I was wondering what role music plays in your art. Is it an inspiration? It is a structure. You mentioned the score. So how much of the music informs your art?
Music informs my art, informs my life like a great deal. I mean, listen to music all the time, and especially in the studio. But also, I'm not a musician, but I make music, and I say that I play with the piano. I love synths and keyboards, and early on, I created scores through interviews with activists and family members on specific topics, and then create scores to like guide their voices and embed those scores into sculpture. So the music in my work, it's always either embedded into a piece, like a fabric piece or something like that, or more recently, it's been embedded into these fiber drums that typically, like, well, I can speak from my experience, like my mom would pack these drums like every Christmas or something like that with, you know, food stuff and back home to Guyana. But I use the drums as like this, like an amplifier for my music.
These are cargo drums. These aren't musical drums.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah. They're used strictly for shipping. And there's an image in the slideshow that shows the installation. But the drums are like mounted like paintings on the wall, and the score travels between the two drums. So there's like a sort of like sound element of like, you know, a part of one song would be in this drum, and then, you know, you literally hear the sound move across the room into the other drum, and that kind of reflects on like this idea of like migration, connection, and like where you move to and how you keep ties to where you're from, and you know, so it's a constant you know, return and also departure, you know.
I would say as an outsider, I'm also impressed at how often Ivan's in costume, and that his cyanotypes are like a vignette of a longer play of something. It's like a scene, an act or a scene in something.
Yeah.
So you're getting in a costume, you're performing, you're capturing yourself,
Yeah.
you're bringing it into your work too. So I
Yeah.
get a sense of musical, of like of dance in some of your pieces.
Yeah.
That wasn't fail.
No, yeah, dance and like stage production, but I try not to like overproduce my work. Like I always try to keep it like sort of like on a low, grounded level, because I want people to see the imagination that, you know, the simplicity and the imagination that goes into it. How like, you know, a bed sheet painted can, you know, with a camera strap wrapped around my waist can turn into like a tunic or something like that. Or, you know, more recently I've just been performing in the clothes that I just wear, like show up to the studio. You know, so it's a level of like world building, but again, like, you know, drawing from the, you know, the space that, you know, I know, the space that's like right in front of me, like literally using like materials that are in my environment, but also, you know, like building a world that can resemble mythology, but when you really look at it, you're like, oh, this is our world, you know. This is the world we know, and that's what myth draws on, is at least epic poetry. A lot of the landscapes and spaces and temples that they talk about in these poems, they still exist. You can still go and you know, stand in front of them.
Interesting.
So it's that way of like how, you know, poetry, myth bleeds into reality and then back again, you know.
We
Any
are
other
at
questions?
time, so thank you for those questions. Ivan, Luther, thank you so much for such a fun
No wins.
conversation. No scorekeeping, but thank
We gotta.